For our first wedding anniversary, Cain went all out, planning an anniversary party that took me completely by surprise. He wanted it to be special, so he invited all our close friends and family. I never expected such a grand gesture. It wasn't my idea to have a big celebration, but Cain made sure it would be a memorable one. He's always been thoughtful about special occasions, and he really wanted to make this one count. As part of the celebration, Cain's mother volunteered to bring the cake, which seemed like a kind gesture at the time. But when she unboxed the cake, everyone was shocked. Written across the top was the message, "Cheers to 365 days of gold digging." The room went silent as everyone processed what they were seeing. The tone of the message was clearly intended to be a joke, but it was one that crossed a line, especially coming from Cain's mother, who had a history of tension with me. My mother-in-law tried to laugh it off, calling it a harmless joke, but I wasn't about to let it slide. I knew I had to say something, so I decided to tell everyone the real reason why Cain left her years ago. It wasn't the first time she had made subtle digs at me, but this was a step too far. I explained that her son had left her because of her manipulative and toxic behavior, and I couldn't sit quietly while she threw passive-aggressive comments my way. Of course, the room went dead silent after I spoke. It was uncomfortable, but I wasn't going to let her disrespect me, especially on our anniversary. The situation ended quickly after that, but now she's threatening to sue me for defamation, claiming I've damaged her reputation by telling the truth. Part of me feels vindicated for finally standing up to her, but another part of me is wondering if I went too far. It's hard to know if I should regret what happened, especially since she's now making it into something legal. The day of the anniversary started out beautifully. Everything had fallen into place, the decorations, the guests, the music. The atmosphere was joyful, filled with the kind of warmth that comes from celebrating love with the people who matter most. But then, a small logistical hiccup popped up. We got word that there had been an issue with the cake delivery. It wasn't going to make it to the venue. Instead, someone needed to pick it up in person. The bakery was on the other side of town, far enough that if Cain went, he'd be gone for a good while. Since he had poured so much energy into organizing the event and wanted to be there to welcome our guests, we decided to ask for help. We sent out a group message to our family, explaining the situation and offering to cover any trouble or fuel expenses for whoever was willing to help out. To our surprise, it was Cain's mother who volunteered. She replied almost immediately, assuring us she'd handle it and that we shouldn't worry. Given our complicated history, I was taken aback by her offer, but I genuinely appreciated the gesture. Felt like maybe, just maybe, we were turning a corner. The party rolled on, lively and full of laughter. When my mother-in-law arrived with the cake, she placed the box gently on the dessert table. Everything seemed fine. Cain and I were busy mingling with guests, caught up in the joy of the evening, and we didn't think to check the cake immediately. After all, we trusted her. She had promised it would be safe. When the time came to cut the cake, she was unusually enthusiastic. She practically rushed over, insisting she be the one to unveil it. I remember thinking it was a bit strange, but in the chaos of celebration, I didn't press it. And then she opened the box. First, I thought I had misread it, but there it was, frosted across the cake in large, bold letters. Cheers to 365 days of gold digging. For a few seconds, everything stopped. I could feel every eye in the room shifting toward us. The buzz of conversation vanished. Cain and I just stared at it, stunned and confused, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. Then, without missing a beat, his mother pulled out her phone, aimed it directly at our faces, and snapped a photo, like she had been waiting for this moment. She laughed, loudly, cruelly, as if she hadn't just humiliated us in front of everyone we cared about. Cain turned to her, his face dark with disbelief and fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he asked, his voice tight with restrained anger. The betrayal on his face said it all. This wasn't just a joke gone too far. This was intentional, planned, and heartless. At first, my mother-in-law brushed the whole thing off with a laugh, claiming she only wanted to see our reaction to the cake. But Cain wasn't letting it slide that easily. He pressed her for a clear answer, asking if she had intentionally written that message and what it was supposed to mean. That's when she gave this exaggerated shrug and said, "Oh, relax, Cain. It's just a cake. You two are always so uptight." I thought it'd be funny, just a little harmless fun. I stood there in shock, humiliated. It was supposed to be a moment of joy, a celebration of our marriage, and instead, I was being publicly ridiculed. I looked straight at her and asked, "Who exactly is laughing? Because it's definitely not anyone here." But she just rolled her eyes and dismissed me as overreacting, painting me as overly sensitive for being upset about what she still insisted was just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was cruel. The room was silent, the tension suffocating, and everyone could feel that this was far from light-hearted fun. My husband, trying his best to keep composed, turned to her and asked why she would say something so mean at a moment that was meant to be special for us. And then she said the one thing that left the entire room stunned. "Well," she said casually, "I can't be the only one who's thought she might be a gold digger, right? I mean, she comes from nothing and marries into money. It was just a joke." "Don't be so dramatic," I audibly gasped. My cheeks burned as the sting of her words set in. I felt stripped of my dignity, laid bare in front of our closest friends and family. It wasn't just offensive, it was calculated. It was humiliating. For a few seconds, I couldn't even react. But Cain didn't hesitate. He turned to his mother, his voice calm but firm, and told her she had gone way too far. He made it clear that her words were unacceptable and that if she didn't offer a genuine apology, she would be asked to leave. He didn't raise his voice, but the message was unmistakably strong. He was standing up for me, and he wasn't going to let her continue disrespecting me under our roof. I could see the shift in my mother-in-law's expression as Cain firmly stood his ground, his patience wearing thin. She scoffed, as if his reaction was completely irrational. Looking around the room, she tried to gauge the reactions of the guests, probably hoping someone would side with her. With an exaggerated sigh, she said, "Oh, come on, Cain. You can't seriously be throwing me out over something so silly." Her dismissiveness was infuriating. It was clear to everyone in the room that this was no trivial matter, and the more she downplayed it, the more the tension built. She was disguising a direct attack on me as a joke, and Cain wasn't having it. Despite her acting like she was untouchable, Cain's eyes showed his determination to stand up for me. He wasn't about to let her get away with humiliating me, especially on our special day. At that point, I had reached my limit. I stood by my husband, my voice steady but firm as I told my mother-in-law that she either needed to apologize immediately or leave our party. Instead of taking responsibility, she rolled her eyes and dismissed the situation. "Okay, now this is getting overly dramatic. Let's just let this whole thing go," she said, as if trying to trivialize everything. She even suggested we skip the cake if it upset me so much, which only made me angrier. I reminded her that this wasn't just any cake. It was our wedding anniversary cake, something Cain had thoughtfully arranged to celebrate our milestone together. This was our moment, and she had hijacked it with an inappropriate and hurtful message. What made it worse was her refusal to acknowledge how wrong her actions were. I made sure to point all of this out to her, emphasizing how much she had crossed a line. It was supposed to be a day for us to celebrate our love, but instead, she had turned it into a spectacle. At this point, my mom and sister, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, stepped in to support me. They politely but firmly told my mother-in-law that her actions were far from funny. They were deeply disrespectful and hurtful to both me and Cain. My mother-in-law, now cornered, became even more defensive. She turned to the other guests and asked, "Do you all really think I've done something so terrible?" Thankfully, a few guests voiced their support, agreeing that her behavior was inappropriate. Their reactions only seemed to irritate her further, as she realized she wasn't going to get the validation she was hoping for. It was clear she wasn't prepared for the backlash, and it made the situation even more tense. She finally rolled her eyes one last time and turned to me with a dramatic sigh. "Fine," she said. "You want an apology? I'll give you one." But it was anything but sincere. What followed was the most hollow excuse for an apology I'd ever heard. Barely a muttered admission before she immediately launched into more jabs. She added that I needed to stop getting my panties in a twist over a cake, and that if I hadn't been so sensitive, we could have laughed about the prank someday. According to her, I had ruined the entire evening by overreacting. It wasn't an apology, it was just another way to belittle me, to brush off what she did and make me feel like I was the unreasonable one. She wasn't sorry. She just didn't want to be the villain in front of everyone else. And honestly, it was infuriating. I'd had enough. Right then and there, I told her everything I'd been biting back for far too long. I reminded her, in front of everyone, that maybe it was time she finally grew up. That she needed to stop pulling childish, hurtful stunts just for attention. And that, frankly, this was one of the major reasons why her own marriage had fallen apart. Why my father-in-law had finally walked out just 2 months ago. Let me give you some context. My mother-in-law has a long history of tone-deaf, thoughtless pranks. Always brushing them off as jokes, no matter who they hurt. Earlier this year, my father-in-law had gone on his annual vacation with his 2 best friends from high school. It was something they'd done for years. A low-key trip to relax and catch up. It was important to him, especially since he only saw those friends once a year. Cain had told me plenty of stories about how, in the past, his mom had pulled dramatic stunts just to get his dad to cut the trip short and come home. Things like fake emergencies or exaggerated problems. She'd been warned repeatedly to stop. He'd even threatened to leave her over at once. And for a while, she actually behaved. But then this year, she went too far. Just before the trip, she came down with the flu. My father-in-law was concerned, genuinely. He offered to cancel his trip to stay and take care of her. But she insisted he go. Cain and I promised to check in on her regularly. And since the tickets were non-refundable, he reluctantly went. He made sure she had everything she needed and told her he'd keep his phone close in case of any emergency. He just wanted a few days to enjoy time with his friends. Nothing extravagant, just something he looked forward to every year. He thought she understood. She didn't. Just 2 days into my father-in-law's long-awaited vacation, my mother-in-law decided to pull the most outrageous stunt yet. In the middle of the night, she called him in full-blown hysterics, hyperventilating, crying, and claiming she was experiencing all the symptoms of a heart attack. Naturally, he was terrified and begged her to call 911. But instead of doing that, she started launching into a dramatic monologue about how much she loved him and how, if this was the end, he shouldn't mourn for too long and should eventually move on. He was panicked, convinced she was dying, and immediately called Cain and me, pleading with us to check on her. He even told us he was dropping everything and flying home immediately, ready to cut his trip short without a second thought. Alarmed by the frantic call, Cain and I didn't waste any time. We called her ourselves, telling her we were going to contact emergency services. But instead of agreeing, she begged us not to call 911 and insisted we come over in person. The whole thing felt off, but we weren't about to take chances with a potential heart attack, so we rushed over. And what did we find? Her, stretched out comfortably on the couch, perfectly healthy, eating chips and watching TV like it was any other night. Cain and I were floored, just standing there, completely stunned, trying to process what we were seeing. And then she had the audacity to laugh. She laughed. Turns out, the whole thing had been a prank. She wanted to test whether father-in-law still loved her enough to abandon his vacation and come rushing back home. Her words, not mine. Cain and I were furious. She had faked a heart attack, a literal life-or-death emergency, just to see if her husband still cared. We called father-in-law right away to stop him, but it was too late. He was already mid-flight, worried sick the entire journey. By the time he landed and finally heard our voicemails explaining that she was perfectly fine and the whole thing had been a disgusting joke, the damage was done. He was devastated, emotionally drained, and furious. He had been manipulated, his vacation ruined, all because his wife needed some bizarre form of validation. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension as my words hung in the air. Everyone was stunned into silence, and my mother-in-law stood frozen, processing the weight of what I had just said. She looked at me with a mixture of shock and disbelief, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't have a snide remark or a defensive retort. It was as though she had been caught completely off guard, her usual composure crumbling under the truth I had just thrown at her. I saw her face flush with embarrassment, and her eyes darted around the room, hoping for someone to come to her defense. But no one did. They all knew what I had said was the truth. Her childish pranks and cruel jokes had caused too much damage in her marriage, and now she had done it again, this time ruining what should have been a beautiful celebration for Cain and me. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt as I stared her down, because I knew that she needed to hear this, needed to understand the consequences of her behavior. "You've already lost one family," I continued, my voice steady but firm. "And if you keep acting like this, you'll lose everyone who's left." I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, but it was fleeting, replaced quickly by her usual defensiveness. She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't done yet. "You've made it clear time and again that you have no respect for anyone else's feelings, and I'm done letting you walk all over us. If you're going to continue to be a source of pain and drama in our lives, then I'm out. Cain and I deserve peace, and I won't let you ruin that for us, not anymore." There was a long, tense pause. The guests were watching us, some with sympathy, others with wide eyes, unsure of what would happen next. My mother-in-law, unable to argue any further, simply stood there, flustered and defeated. She finally muttered something about how she didn't deserve this treatment, but the words lacked the usual venom they once carried. The damage was done, and she knew it. There was nothing left for her to say. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in front of everyone, her pride shattered. Felt like a victory, but at the same time, I knew this wasn't over. My mother-in-law had been toxic for too long, and while this confrontation had been necessary, I knew that it would take more than one conversation to change anything. But for the first time, I felt like I had taken control. I had stood up to her, and I had defended my marriage and my dignity. Cain, who had been quietly watching from the sidelines, came to my side as I made my way back to him. He gave me a soft smile, his arm wrapping around me protectively. "You did the right thing," he whispered in my ear. "I'm proud of you." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For once, I felt like we had taken a stand, and maybe, just maybe, it would finally be the wake-up call my mother-in-law needed. When she realized we were talking to her like a misbehaving child, I could see some of the guests around us trying to hold back laughter, and that only made her angrier. Her face turned bright red, a mix of embarrassment and fury, as it dawned on her that not only had she completely lost control of the situation, but she had also become the punchline of her own twisted joke. She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass, seething with rage, then spun around and stormed out of the party without saying another word. Watching her leave felt like a win. Not a petty one, but a satisfying confirmation that Cain and I had stood up for ourselves. Still, deep down, I had the feeling this wasn't the end. Knowing my mother-in-law, she wouldn't go down quietly. She'd bide her time and come back with something just as dramatic, if not worse. But in that moment, we stood our ground, united. No one at the party defended her after she left. In fact, everyone agreed she got exactly what she deserved. The people around us saw through her antics and recognized just how cruel and uncalled for her behavior had been. Cain threw the cake away without hesitation, and we picked up where we left off, carrying on with the celebration like she had never been there. Since then, though, she's been relentlessly calling and leaving voicemails, demanding I apologize for humiliating her in front of everyone. She's even threatened to sue me for defamation, claiming that because people now know the real reason behind her divorce from my father-in-law, she's being harassed and publicly shamed. According to her, I crossed a line by sharing personal details about her marriage and that she's disgusted by my disrespect. Honestly, it's laughable. There's no legal leg for her to stand on. She's just grasping at straws, trying to play the victim. Again, the truth isn't defamation. She humiliated herself when she brought that cake to the party and tried to make a mockery of our anniversary. Now that the story's out and people are holding her accountable, she's panicking. But I'm done playing along. If she wants to drag this into court, let her. The only person who'll come out of that looking foolish is her. Cain and I are united, and she's not going to bully or intimidate me into silence. Not this time. To answer a few of the questions I've been getting, Yes, unfortunately, this isn't the first time my mother-in-law has pulled something outrageous. In fact, one incident I'll never forget happened on my actual wedding day. While I was getting my hair and makeup done, she stole my wedding dress and hid it. At first, I didn't realize it was gone, but as time ticked closer to the ceremony and I still wasn't dressed, panic kicked in. I was scrambling, in full-blown meltdown mode, tearing through the bridal suite trying to figure out what had happened. She waited until I was on the verge of tears before casually strolling in, dress in hand, laughing, like it was the punchline to the best joke ever. Even back then, I remember thinking it was cruel and wildly inappropriate, especially on my wedding day. But somehow I brushed it off. I told myself she was just eccentric, maybe a bit tone-deaf, and that this was just her odd way of bonding. We weren't especially close, so I chalked it up to her being, well, her. But looking back now, I can't believe I ever let that go. I really did think she'd change after my father-in-law left her. I figured the end of that marriage might shake her enough to take a hard look at herself and maybe grow from the experience. Clearly, I was wrong. If anything, she's become worse, still treating serious moments like they're part of some personal sitcom she's starring in. Now, about the cake. If she had written some random, harmless phrase, I might have rolled my eyes and let it go. But no. She chose to write "Gold Digger" on a cake, at a party meant to celebrate our marriage. That wasn't a prank. That was a personal attack. It wasn't just tacky, it cut deep. That word doesn't just insult me. It challenges the very foundation of my relationship with Cain. Yes, he's wealthier than I am. That's never been a secret. But our marriage isn't built on dollar signs. We were together for years before we even started talking about marriage. What we have is love, partnership, and mutual respect. I didn't marry Cain for his money. I married him for who he is. Her message was more than just inappropriate, it was cruel. It showed how warped her sense of humor has become, and how little she respects me or our relationship. Instead of using our celebration as a moment to support her son and welcome me, she used it as a platform to humiliate me and air her own toxic assumptions. It's clear now that she's so tangled up in her own bitterness that she can't tell the difference between a joke and flat-out disrespect. The situation with my mother-in-law has reached a point where it's hard to even recognize her anymore. The way she twists the narrative and refuses to accept responsibility for her actions is downright disturbing. I think it's beyond time for her to take a step back and reflect on the damage she's caused, not just to our relationship, but to her own family dynamic. The way she behaves is indicative of someone who needs help, and I can't continue to let her harm those around her without facing the consequences of her actions. Cain and I are both fed up with the games she plays. When she threatened to sue me, it was the final straw. I never expected her to act so recklessly, but she has always had a knack for turning any situation into one where she plays the victim. Cain sat down with her after that, and for the first time, I saw him stand up to her in a way I hadn't expected. He made it very clear that I wasn't going to apologize. The boundaries had been set. He told her that no matter how angry she was, she would never be allowed to direct that anger at me again. Her reaction was predictable. She threw a tantrum, accusing Cain of disrespecting her after all she had done for him. The guilt-tripping and manipulation were just as exhausting as I'd feared. But Cain didn't give in. He reminded her that his loyalty was to me now, and I came first. Her refusal to see the truth and continue twisting things only furthered my conviction that this toxic behavior needed to end. After Cain didn't respond to her manipulative text, she left me several voicemail messages, playing the victim once again. In them, she accused me of isolating Cain from his family, claiming that I was trying to keep him all to myself. She even threatened to expose me, painting me as a gold digger. The absurdity of it all left me speechless, but it also showed how far gone she truly is. At this point, both Cain and I know that her behavior is not going to change unless she takes a hard look at herself. We've both made it clear that we won't tolerate her attempts to disrupt our marriage. I'm thankful every day that Cain has fully committed to setting boundaries and standing by me. Together, we're determined to not let her toxicity poison our lives any longer. I'm relieved that we are finally starting to take control of this situation, but I know that things are far from over with her. Still, I have to trust that we've done the right thing. The only way forward now is to continue focusing on our life together and leaving her drama behind. It's been 3 months since our last update, and Cain and I have had zero contact with his mother. After weeks of relentless harassment, we felt we had no other choice but to block her. It's unfortunate that it's come to this, but she has made it painfully clear that she's incapable of acknowledging, or even understanding, the damage she's caused. She never got the apology she demanded from me, and to be honest, she never will. As for my father-in-law, he eventually found out about the cruel prank she pulled at our anniversary celebration. He reached out to me afterward to express his regret and told me how sorry he was that I had to deal with her behavior. He confided that she had pulled similar stunts on him many times throughout their marriage, which is ultimately what led to its breakdown. Hearing that from him was both validating and heartbreaking. It confirmed that what happened to me wasn't an isolated event. It was just the latest chapter in a long pattern of manipulative behavior that has hurt so many people close to her. In fact, her lack of remorse was one of the main reasons my father-in-law didn't attend the anniversary party in the first place. He actively avoids events where she'll be present. They're currently in the middle of a bitter divorce, and from what I've heard, she's doing everything in her power to make it harder on him. It's sad to watch their relationship unravel like this, but it's also clear that he deserves peace after everything he's endured. No one should have to live under the weight of her emotional games. Meanwhile, Cain and I are focusing on our life together, setting firm boundaries and supporting each other every step of the way. It's disappointing that the family dynamic has become so strained because of her actions, but we're committed to prioritizing our well-being and protecting our happiness. We've learned that sometimes peace means choosing distance, and we're okay with that.